Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead. Welcome to episode 191, Your Priority Project. In a past episode called Your Writing Project Mix, which I will link to in our show notes, I talked about the importance of having a variety of writing projects that you're working on. And this is not the same standard advice that you might hear where you should always have something that's submitted, something that you're working on, and maybe something in a revise and resubmit stage. I'm actually talking about the types of projects that you could be working on at any given time. And so these, as I referred to in that past episode, I talked about the idea of having something like a completion project, like one project you're really going to move to completion. Usually that project becomes your priority because you know that's the one that you want to get out the door as soon as possible. You might have other ones in there. So sometimes there's a long-term project that maybe you're working on a little bit at a time. Some projects, especially long-term research, maybe you're doing research in a lab or you're doing archival research and it's taking you a while to collect that. So you're working on that project in spurts around when you're able to get your data collection. That's possible. You might have, say, these short-term projects like a conference proposal and then conference slides that sort of interrupt your other writing rhythms. And then, of course, we have the good old when a writing project comes back, another episode that we did that I'll put a link to in the show notes. So, one of the things I want to get to today is to talk about how we work on these projects and how we make decisions about what you should be working on at any given time. And so I'm going to share a screen. So audio listeners, you don't actually have to see what's on the screen, but you can check it out on YouTube if you want. I have referenced a list that I keep in Penzu. I talk about Penzu all the time. It's just a online writing notebook where I keep my notes. But one of the things that I do every semester is kind of think about, all right, what projects do I want to work on during the semester? What's maybe an ideal writing schedule where I could get some work done? So I talked about having a teaching intensive semester in a past episode where I talked about the idea that I really only have Mondays and then a little bit of two other weekday mornings, and that's it. So I also talked about why I'm making time to plan because my semester is kind of overloaded. And so one of the things that I want to do with thinking through my scholarship is decide what is a priority project. And for me, a priority project has a couple of markers about it. One, it could be a completion project, meaning it's a project you just want to see through to completion. But it doesn't have to be, because if that was the case, most of us would, or if we want to say like even a project that has a deadline, most of us would work on the project that has the upcoming deadline, but then maybe neglect a bigger project that's going to have more impact. So a lot of the faculty we work with at Defend, Publish, and Lead on the tenure track, we will talk through some of those things because sometimes those faculty are spending a lot of time preparing a conference presentation, but not doing the long range writing on, say, a book or a series of articles or something that's going to matter more when it comes time for evaluation. So there's a lot of ways you can pick your priority. Sometimes the deadline and your need for completion and the importance of a project to intersect. So that's the case, what happened for me this particular semester. So as I mentioned in a previous episode, I'm trying to work on four different things. I actually had a fifth, but I got rid of it before I ever recorded this episode, fortunately. But there's a couple of projects I need to do. And so one is that I have a manuscript of a book that I have a contract for. They're ready for it. I'm ready to get rid of it. I'm really close. So that has become my priority project. I now have a moved deadline of trying to get rid of it by September 15th. I talked about this in a past episode, how I had to adjust my deadlines a little, as we all do. But this one, there's all kinds of things intersecting here that make it a priority. It's a project I'm contracted to do, so I promised it to somebody. It has an upcoming deadline. It's a project I've been wanting to get out the door forever, so all the factors are there for me to get it finished. I'm also motivated to work on it, so this would be another thing that's really maybe important to kind of think through why I want to make it a priority. But then these other projects, if I think through what happens after I get rid of that manuscript, because that one will go, and then I'll have three left. I have them listed in order on the screen, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll be in the order that I need to do. It was just a list of things that I know I need to do. one of the things I know I need to do is develop this interview protocol that I've talked about in other episodes. So this is more like some IRB, some institutional research legwork I need to do to be able to get another publication going. I also have an invitation to turn in a book proposal and a sample chapter to a press that actually asked me to do something. So that's not due till December, but that's also, that's not a small thing to make a proposal and a sample chapter for a book that has not been written yet. I have a lot of the content, but I haven't made it into anything. So that has to be something. And then I still have an article that's now 80% finished that should be a completion project, but all these other things kind of get in the way. So how I'm thinking through priorities is once I get rid of that first, kind of deadline priority, really important manuscript due September 15th, I have to make some decisions. And so how I'm thinking through some of those decisions right now is that this is how much time will these projects take? So for example, this interview protocol, I bet I probably could get an application and those questions completed within a week. I bet, in my writing time within a week, I probably could do it. I've got a lot of things kind of ready for it. And so I started thinking about this, that I really should make that my next priority, because then those interview questions have to get approved by a board. So in other words, I have to send it somewhere and wait on somebody else. So I think that is going to be my next priority because it's got that short-term timeline and I need somebody else to do something with it. So when you're trying to think through priority projects, that would be another thing I'd look at is what's something I could knock out, but then somebody else could work on for a while. If this was going to take me a month, I probably would not make that my next priority coming up. But because I think I could do it in, say, 5 working days at work, and then somebody else will get it for a while, to me, that would be a really efficient use of time because while somebody else is looking at it for institutional research approval, I could be working on either finishing off an article or drafting a book proposal. So at this point where I am right now, I don't know which one of those two things I will do. I think in this case, I probably will look at whichever one appeals to me in terms of energy. So that's something else on the writing project mix that I've talked a lot about is thinking through what's your writing energy level for doing some of this stuff. So, there's a lot of different ways to prioritize a project. I just think we have a lot of projects we're juggling at one time. And designating one is this is the one that I'm working on most of the time during the time frame can be helpful. So, for example, this doesn't mean that maybe I'm only working on one project at a time and I'm not using any time at all for other projects. Most academics aren't able to work that way, just the competing workloads and the deadlines and the need to get stuff out. It's really possible you're working on 3 different things in a week. But when we're talking about priority, I tend to think about priority in not just which project it is, but also what time am I going to give it? And so I always give it the best time I've got. So Monday is my best day for writing. I have, the biggest blocks of time and all that. So how it will look for me is that I will be working on that book manuscript on Monday because that's the best day I can do it. It's my most important thing. It's my priority. But then I have these little slivers of time on Wednesday and Friday. So my guess is I probably will be doing some legwork for these other projects during that time. So I might work, say, a half an hour here or there on that article that I said I had 80% done. Maybe I can move it to 80, 86% done or something like that. So, when we're thinking through priority projects, I think it's really helpful to just say, okay, what's my project mix for the semester? So for me, I know I usually cannot pull off more than 4, sometimes 5 if I have some smaller things, and I did, so I already got rid of one. But some of us only will have 1 or 2. So, for example, if your dissertation is something you're working on, and obviously that is your priority, you might be working on an article on the side, but more of your time might be going to that dissertation, except, maybe if you're getting really close to an article deadline or something like that. So I encourage you to kind of look at what projects you have and just make the decision. Like in my best hours, look at your calendar, see when's the best time I can actually get some writing done, use that time for your priority projects. And then if you're able to juggle multiple projects or have to out of necessity, I would look at kind of those times that maybe aren't at quite as ideal, but you can still get some work done and save those time slots for these other projects. Also, I mentioned many times in our episodes, but Textbook and Academic Authors Association is one of our sponsors. And so, in some of the resources that they have, I think are really helpful. They have a writing log that you can get to in their resource bank. And so, one thing you might think about too is just kind of tracking time on projects and thinking through how might I get something accomplished on this one project, but keep track of what I'm doing with this other project. Because another thing with priority project is that the other projects that aren't priorities, you can go longer in between without kind of touching those projects, working on those projects. So you definitely need a place to keep track of where you might be, where you left off on those projects. There's a lot of different ways to do that. I've mentioned that sometimes I do this with Microsoft Word where I'll leave myself a comment and a highlight. I also leave some notes in Penzu, just depending on what the project is. But part of course, figuring out your whole writing project mix is figuring out when you're going to work on these things and decide how you're going to manage all the different slices of all the academic work that you're doing. So hopefully this helps, and happy writing this week.